What's going on, Dungeoneers? It's me, your boy, Chet Robinson, back from the hospital quick and thick after a deranged man broke into my house and stabbed me in the clavicle. Well, have you know, I'm back now, and I'm ready to start doing what I'm best at, making sorry-ass content for this sorry-ass game of Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. And now this time, we should have no interruptions, because, oh, jeez!
Oh yes, Chet Robinson, your eyes do not deceive you. It is I, Solomon Solitash. I know what you're wondering. Shouldn't you be in prison? And no, I was. And let me tell you, it actually all wasn't that bad. 3 square meals a day, a security detail, roof over your head, all with no rent. Other than the gangs and the mandatory Tuesday butt sex, it all wasn't that bad. But I escaped 3 years earlier than my sentence would have allowed, just because I had caught a whisper on the fucking wind that you, Chet Robinson, were going to start making content about this sorry-ass game once again. So I came here strictly breaking my parole, just so I can square up with you once again. I may not have a knife, but I'll deck you one so good that you'll wish that I did.
Oh, come on, dude. You can't be serious with this shit again. I mean, the last time you were here, you were talking about a game that by the end of the review, you didn't even fully support anymore. That old school Essentials bullshit. Like, nobody even heard of that shit. That's like your lowest viewed video ever. But, what are you coming with today, huh? Anything of relevance?
A low fucking blow there, Chet Robinson. But you're right. Old School Essentials was, the review that I gave it and everything, but at the time, I was just so desperate to find anything at all that was different than D&D 5th edition that I was grasping at straws. But today I come to you, Chet Robinson, not with a straw, but with a stick, with something that can finally truly be deemed as the D&D killer. I present to you none other than the killing blow of Daggerheart.
Damn, bro, you are just always harshing the vibe. You know what, dude? Come on, sit down. We're gonna go at it one more time, but this time I'm not gonna let you just rant all over the place, dude. I'm actually gonna go toe-to-toe with you. I'm gonna name category after category, and if Daggerheart can really beat D&D in the overall points total, then I'll stop playing forever, man. And on top of that, isn't Daggerheart, didn't that come out months ago? You're late to the game, man. Nobody's gonna care what you have to say now.
Oh, you think that people won't care what I, Solomon Solitash, have to say? Well, let me tell you why this is so delayed, okay? Because unlike every other D&D YouTuber out there, I actually played this game adamantly, and not just one little itty-bitty session here and there, no. I have run 2 full campaigns of Daggerheart, and previously being trapped in 10 long years of running Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, I think I'm more than well qualified to tell you what the pros and cons are of each. So I accept your challenge there, Chet Robinson. Put up your dukes, cause I'm about to bust it down, crazy style. This is Dungeon Door, where I bring the dungeon to your door. As always, I am your true host, Solomon Solitash, and today we are exploring which truly is the better game in a one-on-one matchup between D&D 5th edition and Daggerheart. Let the battle begin.
Alright, so first up on Chet's little notebook here of categories, we have the matchup of core mechanics. Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, Daggerheart, let's bust into it. So, with D&D 5th edition, you've got your little wrinkly-dinkly D20s, and I will admit, rolling a D20 is a timeless classic, In every game where it's utilized, especially in D&D the most, which I will say is most likely the forefather of the D20, it is always a good time, 1 is your critical failure, 20 is your critical success, and anywhere lying in between you are simply relying on your ability modifiers to juice you up to whatever that target number is that you need in order to defeat the given foe or obstacle in front of you. Now, alternatively, we have the 2d12 system of Daggerheart. Now, with this, you roll them together as a player, and you are going to get a bit more of a bell curve of results. You know, you're gonna end up more in the 12, 13, 14 range with your ability modifiers helping you. But there is also some nuance there, in which one of your D12s represents fear and the other representing hope. Now, you roll with the D12 on the hope die higher, and well, you're going to garner yourself a hope token, utilizing features of your character later with that hope. But if the fear die rolls higher, you are generating fear tokens for your DM, which they can use for dastardly mechanics such as boosting up foes, taking extra turns, or just bringing the evil down upon you. I will say, after many testing of both, Daggerheart wins this one out with the 2d12. It makes it better for the players so that they get more of a consistent curve. And it also creates an ebb and flow between player and Dungeon Master. Now, when it comes to the battle of character creation between both Daggerheart and Dungeons & Dragons, well, honestly, I'll give it to you, Chet. We are evenly tied. In the categories of race, ancestry, background, community, and class, well, really, you're getting one and the same of both, you know, whether it's race in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition or ancestry in Daggerheart. Both of them are going to provide you with some sort of unique mechanic that is exclusive only to that race or ancestry. As with background or community, you know, you're getting some unique little thing that is only akin to that character for picking that background or community. And finally, class as well, you're getting exclusive features only featured to that class in either or. So that's an easy 3 points on both sides for both Daggerheart and D&D. But where the difference does come into play of character creation is in advancement, in leveling up and customization. You see, in D&D, you are a little bit restricted where you think you have options. You really don't. Whenever you level up, you know, you hit level 2 and, well, that's a dead level, most consider. You're getting not much other than a couple extra hit points and whatnot. You hit level 3, and that's really the big one of D&D, where you get to actually pick your subclass and where you're gonna go. And after that, levels 4 and upwards, some levels still remain dead levels where you're getting no cool new ability or just getting some extra health or something like that. And then the levels where you do get something, it's already pre-chosen out for you on a table or a chart. You know, level 5, you get this ability. At level 7, you get this ability. And so you're just waiting to hit those levels to get something good again. And just have to get through the monotony of the levels in between, where in Daggerheart, every level you are getting something. Levels may go up to 20 all the way in D&D, but they really don't need that when half of them are useless. The levels only go up to 10 in Daggerheart, and each one is impactful. Every single time you level up, you are getting a plethora of options, and you get to pick, checking a box on what option that you want. Do you want more health? You got that. You want more stress? You got that. More damage? More anything. And on top of picking your little advancements, you are also getting new ability cards. Yes, that is right. You may have heard about the cards in Daggerheart, and they are well and true and amazing. You pick, assembling like your own little deck builder, what abilities you're going to want, having them readily accessible to you, and oh, just the customization butters my pants more than a greased monkey's ass. It is, I don't even know what that analogy is, but I know what this is, and that is amazing. Another point for Daggerheart. So now we get into the category of roleplay, you know? These both are role-playing games, after all. So which one does it better? And, well, I'll be fully honest with you, that is another tie between D&D and Daggerheart. You know, at the end of the day, role-playing is not generated by the game, and I don't believe that a game helps facilitate one or the other, better or worse. Role-playing is simply going to come down to whatever table that you're playing with. If you've got a bunch of people that love reading erotica like I do, and then displaying all their king's full frontal on their players, well, you have a problem. Don't do that, alright? I don't do that either. But, you know, I would argue that those people are better role players indeed, when on the other side of the table, even though you've got people that fill out tax forms for fun, they're probably not going to be that good at role playing. So it's one of those situations, you know, where it's hate the player, not the game, and role playing on both sides is evenly matched. And that goes doubly for social encounters that you'll find in the game, you know? When you're rizzing up an NPC, trying to persuade them that, hey man, putting this stick of butter in your pants is the best possible move you could do at this mansion ballroom right now. You know, either way that shakes out in either game, both of them facilitate a good time, you know? You're just falling back on the core mechanics, and where I did say one is better than the other in that regard, social encounters, again, all comes down to the situations that your dungeon master or Dagger Master puts you in and how those players approach it. So another easy one-on-one point for each of them. So now we get into the matchup of combat. And, well, D&D very much is, in its bread and butter, a combat game with everything else added onto it, where Daggerheart does have combat as one of its core tenets, but it's not necessarily all the game is about. And even though that one game focuses on it more than another, I am giving combat to Daggerheart, simply because combat in Daggerheart, time and time again over the course of the 2 campaigns that I played, is fucking quick with it, brother. Every time I am stuck, and I do mean stuck, in a combat in Dungeons & Dragons, it is a 2-hour slog, you know? You can never end a session with a combat in Dungeons & Dragons if you've only got about 30 minutes left in the session, because you gotta tell everybody, hey, you're gonna get no sleep for work tomorrow because we gotta buckle up for the next 2.5 hours, as every single round of combat is a fucking slog to get through. Everyone's got analysis paralysis and what ability that they want to do. Everything's got HP bloat up the fucking wazoo, and it just makes combat take forever. Where in Daggerheart, you have an interesting ebb and flow that makes the game take only about 20 minutes to 30 minutes when it comes to combat. Every time you're going back and forth, and the fight is tooth and nail, and health points for both characters and enemies are low, but unlike an old school Essentials type game or any other OSR, it's not necessarily lethal. You can still have a bit of that power fantasy that you will experience in D&D 5th edition, but it is miles more balanced, where in D&D 5th edition it feels very quickly within the first 2 rounds, you know exactly how this combat's going to go. You are either going to fully wash the enemy, they're going to fully wash you, or if you're roughly evenly matched, the combat is going to take 2 to 3 hours. Where in Daggerheart, even if one side outmatches the other, based on the die rolls and whether hope and fear is generated more or less, it really, you don't know who the victor of the battle is going to be until that battle ends. And so for that, I am giving the dub to Daggerheart. Now, on the topic of combat, that leads us to initiative. Before any combat begins, initiative is always needed to be rolled in Dungeons & Dragons, and that has always taken me out of the game. You know, we're talking, and all of a sudden, oh no, combat's going to begin, and like the screen in Pokemon, there you are, every single person has to roll, and I know we've all been there time and time again, where it's like, alright, combat starts, everybody, roll initiative, you roll it up, and you're like, alright, Dave, what do you got, a 12? Philip, what do you got, a 16? Felipe, what do you got, a 20? And by that point, do you even remember what Dave had? I don't, because every new number that comes in, the old number goes out, and so then you stand there like, okay, I know Felipe said he got a 17, Dave, what did you get again? Oh, right, a 12, or whatever, okay, and then you gotta arrange them, you know, you gotta write it down somewhere, see who's going where, who's going what, and if you've got multiple enemy units, you know, then you're gonna have to place them and see where it goes, and the setup process just to get into combat takes about 5 minutes, and then it's like, alright, finally, I got this all squared away, into combat we go. Now, we're in Daggerheart, you can actually do the situation. I've had so many times in D&D where they're talking to a bad guy and they're like, I hit him. And then it's like, okay, you hit him, now we roll for combat. And it's like, okay, you hit him, but you're actually going like 4th in the round. Where in Daggerheart, you could be like, I hit him. And then it's like, boom, you hit him, you did it, oh, and you rolled with hope, now it stays on the player's turn, you know? And then, oh, you roll with fear, okay, now it switches over to me. It's, the dice literally tell you when to switch over to each other. And so the sides are getting turns that are more movie-like rather than, you know, a standard turn-based RPG video game where it's like, I schmack you, now you schmack me. Where in Daggerheart, it's like, a twing, 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 oh, I've been countered, oh, and then he fucking comes up behind me and rails me thick, and it's like, but it's okay, because I rolled fear, and I knew this would happen, and it's like, oh boy, this could have gone any way, and just for that alone, initiative is going to Daggerheart. And I know that there was many little piss boys on the internet that was like, oh, there's no structure with the initiative, it's just loosey-goosey, everybody could go all over the place. And I will say, there is one drawback to Daggerheart, you know? After trying it for a full one campaign, the whole idea of, you know, you keep rolling with hope and it stays on the player side, or you have X amount of fear and you can keep spending it in order to stay on the bad guy's side, it sounded good in theory, but it actually wasn't in practice, because I don't know what the fuck was going on in that first campaign, but you can, if you have enough fear, you know, steal the spotlight and give it over to the bad guys. But say you run into a situation like I did many a times, where the players are just not rolling fear at all, and they're just keeping hope the whole time. You've got no fear to spend over to the bad guy's side. So the heroes are just absolutely mollywop spamming them one after another. And that's a very real situation you can run into in Daggerheart. But it's like people just glossed this over. And what I started doing in my second campaign of Daggerheart to remedy that situation is they literally say you could do it that way, or you can just say that everybody gets 3 turns. So, you know, if you rolled hope 3 times, congratulations, you've got the full breadth of your turn. But, you know, you roll a fear at any point in there, well, now it switches over to me. I go for as much fear tokens as I have to spend, and then it switches back to another one of the heroes. And that way, you know, it doesn't feel like somebody spotlight hogging on the player side where they've just rolled hope 8 times in a row and they've taken 8 turns, and then it finally gets over to you and, oh, you only got to take 1 turn because you rolled fear. That does suck. So if you just say, hey, no matter if you roll a kabillion hope, you're only getting 3 turns, it really limits it down. And then, you know, you keep it fair. We're also on the bad guy's side. Even if you had fear to take 4 turns or more, you just take 3. And that way, nobody feels cheated. It all feels fair and quick and easy. And so if you make that change, then the initiative in Daggerheart is 100% better. So now we get down to another big holdup on the internet between range and movement in Daggerheart. Now, in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, it is relatively simple. You know, you move 30 feet, every square is 5 feet. This spell has a range of 60 feet. Again, every square is 5 feet. You count it 5, 10, 15, blah, 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 blah. It's simple. It's in most games. Where now, in Daggerheart, they have a little bit of a nuance where they came at you with melee range, very close, close, far, and very far. And in a way, yes, it is abstracted. It's for those people that don't necessarily do the minis on maps type of thing. You can very easily say, hey, a Dagger Master, how far away is that guy? And you'd be like, oh, he's pretty close to you. And it's like, okay, now I know, okay, my weapon says it does close range. He's within range for me to schmack him. But for people that actually want to do the maps and the minis, there is, again, in the rulebook, a way to actually measure that out. Melee obviously is next to you, very close is within 3 squares, close is within 6, far is within 12, and very far is pretty much anywhere on the board. And again, it's like people didn't fucking read that, and they just go on the internet, and they're like, oh, the ranges, they're too abstract, they make no sense. Did you fucking read? No, you didn't. You just wanted to get a video up, you motherfucker. Anyway, that obviously was another point for Daggerheart. Now, we move into damage and health. I went over this a little bit before, but D&D has a health blow to the size of Mount Everest, where Daggerheart, pretty much everything you fight, and any character is going to have maximum 12 health. And on top of that, they also have stress meters as well. And it just makes it so much better when you can give them a challenge that not necessarily would damage their health, but you want a penalty for them. Give them stress, you know? Give them stress, which is a mechanic, because sometimes stress is used for their abilities, and if they're all filled up on stress, well, if they want to take more stress and they're past their meter cap, well, now they start taking actual damage, because now that ability or that stress is taking a toll on their body. And as for health and damage itself, you know, it's all relatively simple, where in D&D, you take 20 damage, you take 20 damage. There you go, you drop 20 off your health. Where in Daggerheart, you have thresholds. I'm sure you've heard about the thresholds. You have your major and you have your severe threshold. Now, if you're taking, let's say your major threshold is 10 and your severe threshold is 20. If you take 1 to 5 damage or so, then you're only losing 1 hit point. If you take between 10 and 19, you're taking 2 hit points. And then if you take 20 and above, that's your severe threshold, you're losing 3 hit points. So it's a way that you can have these big numbers. You can have a giant dragon actually come down and be like, boom, he roars fire on you and he does 50 damage. And it's like, oh fuck, that would kill my level 1 D&D character. Where in Daggerheart, you can show them how lethal this dragon is. 50 damage to you, and it's like, oh, well, I lost 3 hit points. This guy is pretty fucking hard, but at least I'm not down in 1 hit, So, in my opinion, Daggerheart, once again, takes the cake. Another point for it. When you get smacked around like a melted sundae, well, obviously, eventually, you're going to die. Now, for the longest time, I did like Dungeons & Dragons' death mechanic until, I fucking opened my eyes and broadened my expanses. But you go down in D&D 5th edition, and, well, what happens? You start making death rolls. You roll, you're trying to get a certain number, and as long as I believe you get like a 10 or higher, that's 1 good. The minute you get 3 goods, you stand back up at 1 HP, and you're ready to keep tussling. The minute you get 3 failed rolls, well, that's it. Curtains for you. Your character is finally dead. But are you really dead? Are you ever really dead in D&D? Because it is super hard to go down in the first place because everyone's a fucking superhero for some reason. And when you do finally go down, all it takes is somebody, casting a simple spell and boom, you're back up. Or if you do actually die, boom, someone's got Revivify or Resurrection or something else to bring you back from death. Death never truly is the end in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, where in Daggerheart, you have infinitely better death options. You are presented with 1 of 3 options when you lose all of your hit points. You can say, hey, I'm not ready for my character to die, but I will face the consequences. And so you roll your hope die, and as long as you roll above your level, then you're able to keep living with, only maybe a small narrative consequence to you. But if you do roll your level or lower, well, now you lose a hope slot permanently. You still get to live, but every time now that you take that, you are risking the chance that you are losing your hope meter cap, which could put a real damper on your abilities and your usage of hope. Alternatively, you could decide, like one of my players did, that, hey, there's no way that we're gonna win this fight unless I get a critical right now. And you can choose to die and go out in a blaze of glory in which you get to take one last action that is an automatic crit. And in the one and only time that I see it, my player used that blaze of glory to great effect. They were fighting a plant boss, and it was whittled down to its final HP, but they just needed something to be able to hit it. They were whiffing all their final attacks, and he's like, I gotta do this for you guys. And he charged into the beast with the explosives he had on him, and they both exploded together, saving the day and giving an amazing narrative send-off to that character. R.I.P. my boy Trevor. But the final one you could have, if you just want to leave it up to chance, is you can leave it up to fate, taking your 2d12s, rolling them, and if the hope die is higher, you live, but if the fear die is higher, you die. So, you can really play it any way you want, but the way that I'm playing it is, once again, Daggerheart gets another point for death mechanics. Now we get into weapons and armor between the two, and I will once again say Daggerheart does this miles better. In fact, when I was in my last years of Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, I toyed around with the idea where I was like, man, it really sucks for characters that aren't strength or dexterity based to wield some of these weapons, because they're all centered around strength or dexterity. If you're doing melee, it's strength. If you're doing range, it's dexterity. Everything else, go fuck yourself. Where in Daggerheart, they do what I was trying to do. Make weapons that actually pair to each of the core statistics, so that way you don't feel pigeonholed in making sure, like, hey, I want to be a smart character, but I also want to wield weapons, so I'm gonna have to put some points into my strength, even though I don't visualize my character as a strong character. Well, in Daggerheart, if you want to put all your shit into presence, which is their charisma, you can, and you can still wield weapons that pair with the presence stat. An amazing idea that should have been done eons ago in other games. And for that alone, weapons in Daggerheart win full frontal. Now also, with the armor in D&D, what does it do for you? What does it do for you? It raises your armor class number. It's just a number that is the number that you have to hit, or the enemies have to hit you in order for you to be taking damage. You know, you got an AC of 15, the enemy has to roll a 15 or higher to hit you and do damage. Boring. Yawn. In Daggerheart, the armor actually matters. They give you armor slots based on it. You know, you could have anywhere like 3, 5, 7, and the armor all has different things. You know, it could lower your agility or heighten this or blah blah blah. And so, you know, you put it on, and some armors have special effects to them, especially, you know, like magical ones and whatnot. And then if you do get hit, because you're trying to hit the character's evasion, which is unique and totally separate from the armor they're provided, from whatever armor they put on, you get hit and you're like, okay, I don't want to take any damage. I got hit for you know, only one. I'll scratch away an armor slot, whittling down my armor, and I will negate that damage that I just took. That's how armor should work. It should be something that soaks damage and then slowly whittles down, and once your armor is broken, well, now you have no defense, and as long as the enemy is hitting your evasion, you're taking damage. Another quick and easy point for Daggerheart. And on top of weapons and armor, we get into equipment. Equipment in Daggerheart is so much better as well. You actually have narrative descriptions for every little thing, and they're all unique and fun things, where in D&D, you know, it's just like a fishing pole, a box of coom, you know, blah blah blah. It takes, you know, the player to come with imagination of what it's going to do, where the equipment in Daggerheart ranges from basic to fantastical. And every time my players got a piece of equipment in Daggerheart, it always felt like they got a magic item or something. And for that, another easy point for Daggerheart. How do we get all these weapons and armor and equipment? Well, that's with the thing that makes the world go round in these fantasy games, gold, and the economy therein. In Dungeons & Dragons, it's quite simple as in all other RPGs, you know. You just have to suspend disbelief that your character is walking around with fucking 5,000 gold on them, but they're not encumbered in any way, which way, form, or fashion. And you could play with encumbrance, but that's always a fucking task in and of itself. So they answer this quite simply in Daggerheart by reducing it down to handfuls of gold, bags of gold, chests of gold, things like that. So you can play abstractly. You know, you go to a town that you didn't prepare the prices for, you know, instead of being like, shit, like, well, a health potion's 50 gold, so this should be less than that, but more than the other things, so maybe like 25 gold. You know, you really gotta think about your economy beforehand in a game like Dungeons & Dragons, where in Daggerheart, they roll up to a merchant that you just kind of, you know, threw together, and it's like, that's about a handful of gold. Give me a handful of gold. And as long as they've got a handful of gold marked on their sheet, they give you a handful of gold. And on the sheet, it literally says how much you can hold. You know, you've got X amount of coinage here, and then it turns into bags, and then the bags turn into chests, and it's like, okay, well, that makes sense. I can only hold one chest worth of gold upon me. So for that, the ease of use, you know, people, again, were all like, oh, it's too abstract, it's too abstract. I find it infinitely easier, and if you don't, you're dumb. You know what, man? Alright, you've been going for a while here, and you're just giving every win to Daggerheart, although I can't disagree, you're making a lot of sense, but I've got a couple dubs of my own. Oh shit, my clavicle band-aid. I'm not faking, I swear. But, let's go to the categories of magic items, since you're all about this, you know, equipment and everything. In the Dungeons Master Guide, you've got plethora of treasure options, and in all the other books, you've got so much cool treasure and magic items with descriptions that really just change the game up, and they feel ultra powerful and cool. Where in Daggerheart, yeah, they got that stuff, but it's very minimal, especially, in the one book that's there, and most of the time, it just feels like the Dagger Master's got to make up, stuff akin to the adventure, which is fine and all, but I think we can both agree that the treasure items in D&D are infinitely better and infinitely cooler. So that's a point for D&D. Then we've also got the monsters and adversaries in D&D. You've got so many cool monsters and iconic monsters, and not just the base monster manual, but in all of the future supplemental stuff. I mean, hands down, the best thing D&D does is make awesome monsters for your players to fight, and they've all got pretty easy to read stat blocks with abilities, that tantalize you and make you want to use them and stuff. Where in Daggerheart, yeah, they've got stat blocks for some enemies, but again, there's only one book out right now, and they can't license out, a lot of the iconic D&D monsters, so they've kind of got just like the basic stuff, and most of the time you're better off just making your own Daggerheart monsters, which I'll admit is easier to do, and we'll get to that, but hands down, with the plethora of monster options that D&D gives you, and the way better stat blocks, we definitely got to give this win to D&D.
Oh, okay, you little strawberry hooker. You got some devious licks in, but let's even out the playing field now. How about we switch over to the category of book and component quality? The Daggerheart book. The Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition book after about 2 sessions of use. What's that? Did all the pages just fall out? Need I say more? Now see, I don't know about you, but if I pay $50-$60 for a fucking book, I expect it not to fall apart in the binding literally immediately. Now, on terms of cost, I think that'll be another tie between us, Chet Robinson. Both of these cost about relatively the same, and you're getting a good page count worth of content in each. I honestly can't argue one way or another on that, so for cost, an easy point to both sides. Now we get into our next category of art. Art on both sides is, serviceable fantasy tomfoolery. You've got cool art like this and like this from D&D, and you've got cool art from Daggerheart like this, and even their cover as well. Pretty cool. You can't complain on either side. Neither one's gonna blow my dick out of the water, but, both of them at least get it sprung up and thick to go. And then I see you have here the book of GM help as a category. Well, again, now this is going to be maybe a bit of a controversial take, but you've got the Dungeons Master Guide from D&D 5th edition, which basically is several pages of be good at your job, don't suck, and then a bunch of treasure items. And Daggerheart also has some pages featuring some GM advice and whatnot. But again, end of the day, I truly believe no matter what a book tells you, you're either a good DM or you're not. You either got it or you don't got it. It's really that simple. You can listen to all the advice in the world from books, from videos, and sure, that might better you, but at the end of the day, you have to take those tools and put them into practice. If you're a boring person and not entertaining in any way, form, or fashion, you're just not gonna be a good game master. And so, again, it's another situation where you hate the player, not the game, a point on both sides. Now, as both a dungeon master and a dagger master, I bet you're wondering which game is easier to prep for. And the answer? Both are equally as easy and as complicated in different forms and ways. Now, on the conversation of campaign prep, well, as I said, most of it is usually spent creating adversaries or creating encounters and whatnot. That's where most of your time is going to go as a game master, right? Well, I hopefully am not alone in this sentiment. Even the most advocate of D&D player has to admit that the rules for encounter building and challenge rating and all that just don't make any fucking sense and has never worked. I mean, look at this shit. If you want to make a monster of your own in D&D, you have to basically solve complex calculus in order to do it with this dastardly looking fucking chart, which makes a challenge rating that ultimately you throw up against your players, and it either ends up being way too easy or way too hard. It's very, if ever, exactly right as this book promises you it will be.
Now, I had mentioned previously I wasn't a huge fan of the stat blocks in Daggerheart, so I typically make my own adversaries, and it's as simple as this. You literally just follow this quick little chart, make your own dude, make adjustments as you see fit, and then they have actual rules in this book for exactly how to balance out an encounter. You see, they divide up the enemies into different, descriptors such as the standard, the solo, the skulk, the range, blah blah blah, and whatever category your created adversary fits in, then they are worth X amount of battle points. And now, based on how many characters you have in your party is how many battle points that the Dagger Master gets to spend. So, say the party's total generates about 7 battle points. Well, now you have 7 battle points to spend on picking which adversaries and how many of them you're facing. So it totally takes out all the guessing game that is presented in D&D, where they promise you, if you have 4 players of level 5 for 1 challenge rating 5, then you're good to go, and then it never works out like that. And then you add more, and you add duplicates, and you gotta do all sorts of math. With this, it's just however many players there are gets you such amount of battle points. You follow the rules giving you such, and then you spend those battle points on however much each of those units are worth, and you have a perfectly matched up scenario. Every time I use this battle point rule featured in this Daggerheart book, my combats always felt fair, fresh, and fun. Another point to Daggerheart. So now we get into the topic of setting. Now, D&D has a long and historied variety of settings, whether it's the vanilla fantasy of the Forgotten Realms, or a little bit of sci-fi with Eberron, or dark fantasy of the Dark Sun, Dragonlance, faraway lands, you name it, D&D's got a setting for it, and it has an extensive history to it, where in Daggerheart, they don't really have any default settings. What they have instead is campaign frames. And with campaign frames, they are unique to the campaign that you're playing. If you're playing in a game that wants to be a Western, then you pick Colossus of Drylands. If you're playing a game that's inspired by Dark Souls, then you pick Age of Umbra. And some of the campaign frames have unique items to them, unique rules just for that, which are incredibly cool and novel ideas. But either way you spin it, I think both do a fine job, so a point on both ends there. Oh well, looks like we're quickly running out of categories for you to defeat me in, Chet Robinson. I see here you have a runability of the game. Well, as abstract as that is, let me tell you, runability between Dungeons & Dragons and Daggerheart is an easy layup for Daggerheart. So many times have I run into fucking issues in D&D where, there's so many rules, and it's so fucking complex, even though it likes to pretend that it's not, that you frequently have to stop the game to look up little rules, and sure, you could be like, oh, rule of cool. I have never once, unfortunately, run into a table that's like, oh yeah, DM, you can do whatever you want. We'll just listen for now and look up the rules later. No, they're always like, you're wrong. I have the rules here, and we're gonna spend 50 minutes looking them up and debating this. Where in Daggerheart, everything is so much simpler, and if you want to know what an ability does, they're all featured, easily accessible on these cards. So instead of flipping through a book, you have literally the entire rule book at your disposal right there on the cards, making it so much quicker and easier to run. Another point for Daggerheart. Now, I know what you might be saying, Solomon, that could just be a skill issue on your end, and you're absolutely right, it probably is. When you've been in and out of prison as much as I have, it's hard to get the shebang on. But when it comes to skills, well, I guess I'll let you take that one. You're damn right you will, man. Skills in D&D are just so much better than that in Daggerheart. First of all, skills don't even exist in Daggerheart. In D&D, you've got a long plethora of skills that are all tied to your core abilities. You got athletics for strength. You've got acrobatics and dexterity. You got medicine under your wisdom, such and so forth. You could really specialize in the type of skills that you want. Where in Daggerheart, they have these things called experiences, where, you just generate and make up these experiences, which, as I've seen from multiple people's tables, unfortunately, sometimes people are not that creative to come up with experiences, and you run into situations where, people try to make these really generic experiences that can be kind of a catch-all, and then it's like, my experience of swordsmanship applies to literally every single combat and whatnot. And sure, you can try and talk that out and make them not pick such generic things, but instead of mulling this over and having this whole conversation on experiences that cost hope to even use, skills are just skills, man. Plain and simple in D&D, and that's an easy point for D&D.
Now, I'll give that one to you, buttered up fuck. Skills are definitely better in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. I personally am not a big fan of the whole experience thing. As you mentioned, it frequently leads to hey, don't pick such a generic one. I know what you're trying to do. You're trying to make it as generic as possible, to fit as many options as possible. Just fucking forget about it. Experiences, I'll continue to use them, but they're definitely not as good as skills. But where we got you with skills is in the ability category. Abilities in Daggerheart are infinitely better. Now, sure, they're written out and cool in D&D as well, but I swear to Bob's ass, D&D is so unbalanced when it comes to its abilities and its spells and whatnot that it is just so player-sided. In every new book that comes out for D&D, whether it is from Wizards of the Coast themselves or a third-party content, provides so many options for the players that there's just nothing you can do to keep up with it, and all the abilities are fucking game breaking. You think you did something and someone's like, oh no, silvery bobs, you didn't do shit. Oh no, time reversal, you didn't do shit. Oh, an illusion, this, that, revivify, resurrection. Holy fuck, brother, give me a break. You people are just breaking the game at level 7. It's insanity. Where in Daggerheart, once again, all the abilities are on cards, quick and easily accessible, and none of them, I have played a game all the way up to level 10 in my first campaign. None of them are broken, and if they are powerful, they're locked away all the way at the end when people should feel a little bit like superheroes. But even then, at level 10, a level 10 Daggerheart character never feels nearly as OP and broken as a level 4 D&D character. And if power fantasy is your thing, then sure, stay over there all you want. But if you want an actual balanced game with fair abilities on the player's end, then Daggerheart, by far and true, is the better game. Now, a core tenet, one of the 3 pillars of D&D is exploration. And boy, oh boy, is that the suckiest category out of any of those pillars. Travel in D&D, you watch Lord of the Rings and those many panning shots of them going on a grand adventure over mountains and whatnot. It is just plain and simple never works in D&D. Nobody has ever cared, and the core mechanics of the game never truly support exploration. Unless you want to get super nitty-gritty about it, the best you can do is reduce climbing a mountain to a couple of D20 rolls, and then, hey, you're there. Where alternatively, in Daggerheart, they have the fantastical idea of environment stat blocks, basically making the terrain that the players are traveling through a combat encounter in and of itself. They're treated exactly the same as if they were fighting an enemy, and then they've got the idea of clocks cooking in there. Maybe it takes, 8 segments of a clock in order to get through this swamp. What are we running into the swamp? Oh, it's got, thick mud to get through. It's got, dangerous animals looking around. It's got leeches that'll suck you dry. Things like that. And it just makes travel so much more fun. And instead of, having to come up with ways that it hurts the character's HP, you could just say, hey, climbing up this mountain, you failed your roll. It's really stressful for you. Gain a stress, gain 2 stress. And so with the stress mechanics, the environment stat blocks, and all that other jazz, it just makes it so much better to travel in Daggerheart. It actually makes it feel like not something that you want to quickly gloss over to get to the next combat. Another point.
it for Daggerheart. In any given game, eventually your players are going to have to run into wanting to craft things. And you know, players always have these cool resources at their hands that they find. They have these cool ideas, and they want to put them into use and make something. Well, in D&D, crafting is literally a fucking afterthought. They put no thought in that. It's just, think about the thing, you know, assign a gold value to it. Do you have the gold value amount that you want and whatever resources the DM decrees? Well then, you know, during your downtime, you can go ahead and create that thing. Where in Daggerheart, crafting something is an actual downtime mechanic where you can say what you want to build, and as long as it's within reason, the Dagger Master could just be like, okay, that's going to take you about 6 clocks of time in order to do, and then, you know, during your downtime, you can make rolls on progress in order to create that thing, and there's no arbitrary economy attached to it. It's just cleaner, it's simpler, and overall better. Daggerheart, another dub. And speaking of downtime and resting in Daggerheart is infinitely better once again. In D&D, when you rest, you have 2 options. Take a short rest or take a long rest. And what do those equate to? Get less health or get more health and regen all your spells and abilities. Where in Daggerheart, you also have the option of short rest or long rest, but they carry so much more weight. You see, if you do a short rest, yes, you're gonna regenerate less health and you know, clear less stress, but also the Dagger Master is getting less fear. And alternatively, if you take that long rest, well, now you're fully regenerating yourself, but your Dagger Master is getting even more fair to utilize. So every time you stop and, you know, take a moment of respite, you are letting the forces of evil gain more traction in the world. Not to mention also, when you rest, you have a plethora of options, such as, you know, crafting, repairing armor, repairing weapons, such and so forth. They have multiple actual game mechanics that you can utilize during downtime, which are just kind of abstracted in D&D. Another easy win for Daggerheart. God, dude, I'm sick of this guy, man. Well, what about third-party content? You know, D&D has so much third-party content. Literally, you go to any convention, D&D stuff. You look online, 20 ads for D&D stuff. It's literally everywhere, man. It's a household name. And no matter what you do or how many videos you make about it, people are just going to keep making stuff for D&D, and it's going to keep selling because it's always going to be a popular IP, no matter how much they drag that game into the ground, man. And what's Daggerheart got? You know, they don't even have a properly good sounding license for people to make third-party content, and I doubt even if more third-party content comes out, it's never nearly going to be as good as D&D's, so that's an easy point for D&D. No, you are absolutely right. The third-party content for D&D is just... the library and content of it is so vast that I doubt Daggerheart could ever catch up. But I will say that the third-party content for D&D is what has kept that game alive for so long. And what did they decide to do but spit in the faces of those people and you know, cause them to crash out like me and lash out against them and make them make YouTube videos and whole channels such as myself dedicated on tearing them down limb from limb to just say what horrible, greedy bastards they are. If it wasn't for the third-party content, D&D would never be as popular as it is now and never be as good as it is now. For whatever they put in their core content books, let's be honest, the only good stuff they have in there is more cooler monsters from expansion books and more cooler treasures. The 2 things that I gave you points for, Chet Robinson. Other than more magic items and more monsters, what good are these third-party content books providing other than, you know, different adventures and whatnot and you know, more player options and more this and that? It's just more of everything. I truly believe that it is quantity over quality when it comes to them over there. We're in Daggerheart, in just one book, I already love the game infinitely more than the 500 books I own that revolve around D&D. And speaking of Crash Out, we get to our final category of Crash Out Prone. Which game causes the least amount of crashing out? And I can tell you right now, that is going to be Daggerheart. Daggerheart takes the dub there once again, because in Daggerheart, I never, ever got into an argument about anything aside from just one singular time, and that was at the very beginning of campaign 1. There was a slight crash out, and then I said, hey guys, look, Daggerheart is a new game. Daggerheart doesn't have to be like D&D. We don't have to constantly have this DM versus player mentality that is fostered by D&D. And I know what you're saying, oh, that's just your players. I have played in 4 different tables with 4 different groups of people in D&D, and every single time, every single campaign, it leads to an argument. It leads to arguing in the session after a group chat about, oh, well, that encounter was broken. Oh, that thing was stupid. You didn't honor my ability. Blah, 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 this and that. There is always a fight in D&D. Where in Daggerheart, aside from that one small little hiccup, everything was beautiful. Everything was clean. Once my players got into the mindset of Daggerheart, the abilities are clearly written, leaving no room for error and no room for argument or discussion. The playability of the game is so much smoother and quicker. Everything is simpler and easier. And in that simplicity and in the tight-knit rules that are written in Daggerheart, it leaves out all the abstraction and obscurity of rules that leads to arguments that are provided in D&D. The crash out proneness of D&D is the main reason why I walked away from it long, long ago. Too many arguments, too many rules lawyers, too many munchkins and min-maxes. You won't find that here in Daggerheart. If you're tired of everything that I just mentioned, all the problem players, you will not find them in Daggerheart, because the game itself does not support an ecosystem for them to survive. It is truly the better game all around. So what say you, Chet Robinson? Have I convinced you? According to the tally, you have been bested, my boy. Yeah, man, cool, whatever. You beat me, alright? You beat me. Daggerheart is a better game than D&D, alright? I admit it. But, geez, where are they? What's wrong, Chet? Looking for the police? Well, unlike you, I've learned from my mistakes. I don't return to the same thing over and over again, you know. I try new and better tactics. This time, I cut your phone lines before I got in here, so your call to the police that you put out as soon as I entered, it didn't go through this time. Also, in my time at the prison, I was the favorite twink there, so I got in with some of the cybercrime individuals. They have transferred all your assets, your home ownership, and everything that identifies you over to me. You are truly cooked once and for all, Chet. No. Yes. Oh, yes. Oh, and one more thing, Chet. You thought you were going to return me to my life of solitude in prison where I had to deal with the gangs and the Tuesday night mandatory butt sex? Well, now I own you. I own your channel. And it's Tuesday, Chet.